There was a kingdom in the land of Mishra, and if its name was heard, the hearts of the kings around it trembled. The name of this kingdom was Kosha. This kingdom was not famous for its green gardens or rivers. With Al-Bahiba and the injustice of its king, Sultan Jabir. Sultan Jabir was not an oppressor. They did not just believe in cutting off heads with a sword. Rather, he was obsessed with playing with people's words. He thought himself the smartest human being in the world. He believed that he who was less than him had no right to live. Outside his palace was a large square and a garage. Walking in the courtyard. Death field. There hundreds of people gathered daily to watch the king's bloody games. Sultani had a close principle. He did not grant his criminals direct death. Rather, he would summon them to a meeting. They ask them riddles. He asks them a logical question. If they are unable, they will be imprisoned and unable to answer. Or make them confused. He was laughing loudly. He points to the executioner. The king was finding a brutal rest. Seeing the spark of hope in my eyes as a prison and then extinguishing it. And in the center of the capital of this kingdom, under the royal palace, there was a dark and stinking basement. It's like dungeons. Sunlight never reached him. Water was constantly seeping from the walls. It was the smell of decay and death. The atmosphere was done. In one of my cells in this prison, the young man, Makia, was sitting smoothly. His name was Zahran. It was not Zahran and El-Sun. Not a road breaker. Nor a murderer, but they are both thinkers and teachers. Prominent in this country. It wasn't his hug either. He said in the market on royal strength should not be in Saifa. Balfi his justice. This word reached Sultan Jabir. Through the spies, he considered it an insult to God. And that same night, Zahran was executed. And throw him in that iron cell. I spent 7 days in Zahran prison. His clothes were torn. And it grew for his life. They put his body, but there was a strange sparkle in his eyes. A jug of knowledge and truth, which the darkness could not swallow. He knew that no one would come back alive. From Sultan Jabir prisons, he waited every day. And the facts of death. Tonight, the sand in the dungeon was tougher than the motad. They suddenly came. Heavy monophonic sounds. We opened the iron door. The prison entered with a sharp squeak. The light of the commons crept in, penetrating the darkness inward. 2 giant guards entered. Behind them was the royal messenger. The messenger looked with dismay at Zahran. The Galesi is on the ground. Then he opened a royal decree. And he read with our clothes. You rebellious young man. The great Sultan has decided. God's shadow on earth. Sultan Jabir. Your case will be tried tomorrow after sunrise. In Sinem magazine. You will have one last chance to save your life. But remember that one. Hayyan did not survive after Al-Fazi Basharat al-Sultan. So activate your last file. Whatever you want of worship. Because tomorrow your head will be separated from your body. The guards rubbed our boots and left. Then closed the door again. Darkness returned. Zahran's heart beats. He knew that he would be killed tomorrow. It will not be a sword. With the mind, the king of deception. Death was looming in front of me. But it took a deep breath. He said to himself. The king has power, pride, and an army. As for me, I have the truth and knowledge. Even if I have to die, I will die in a way that history will remember. That a defenseless prisoner might make you arrogant. Al-Zahran could not sleep well. He kept thinking about each potential question and answer. He knew that the Sultan would not ask a casual question. Rather, this was a checkerboard between life and death. He only had one move. The first tents of the morning were in the form of a pair. Outside, pilgrims began to gather in the square. And every one of them is thrilled to see the new show. Duo drums. This time the executioner came himself. His face was hidden by a canal. "He has shackles on his hands," he said with a heavy voice. "It's young man, your time has come." Zahran gathered his chains and raised his head in bedizer. He was heading towards death, but his feet did not shake. It was the moment when a weak prisoner would be confronted. An airport sermon in his time. As for Judiciary Square, it was a spectacle of horrors. The sun was full of its brightness. And the vast square of the royal castles, which the forgetful person poisoned with fear. Judiciary Square with crowds. The 1,000 were together. But what is strange is a saddlebag that resembles a cemetery saddlebag. He was camping over the place. No one had the nerve to speak loudly. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the raised platform, located in the middle of the field. And on one side of the bill platform, the throne of Sultan Jabir the Stupid was in place, where he was glorified with all greatness and pride. The ministers and advisers were. They stand to his right and left, arms folded. And directly in front of the throne. And just steps away. Stop the most dangerous executioner in the country. This executioner was a man like a mountain. His face is hidden by a black mask. Neither of his wild eyes appear. And in his hands today, a drawn siphon shines and glows in the sun. In his left hand was a thick rope for the gallows. This single scene was enough to make anyone's heart tremble. Suddenly trumpets sounded. Zahran was brought to the field, chained smoothly between the soldiers. His clothes were dirty and torn. He had restrictions on his feet that made his movement difficult. But his head remained shaken. When he entered the council, he did not bow his head before the king. By looking directly into his eyes, Sultan Jabir put Habitain in his mouth. He looked at Zahran with a sarcastic smile. Then he said with a loud whip, "May God Almighty blossom," accompanying the great idea. "We thought you spent your time in prison immersed in thought. Today we want to see you as your role model, this idea from the claws of death." Al-Zahran remained silent. The Sultan continued and talked. "You know that the rebellious punishment is in my kingdom. It's just death, but I find particular pleasure in training smart people. Except their killing. They die a quick death. So it came back to you especially. A strange condition for death." Sultan Jabir leaned forward slightly. He looked at Al-Had and said with an open whip, "For everyone to hear. People, I bear witness that the mother gave this young man a chance at life. His life and death are now. They are imprisoned in prison." Then I point his finger at Zahran. And the top of his bloody scarf. "You prisoner. You should now, and at this moment, say only one sentence. In front of this crowd." There was a deep silence in the council. Then the king said, "What bothered everyone? First case. If the sentence you say, shocking in my opinion, I will command His Majesty to be hung in disbelief on the gallows. The second case. And if the sentence you say is false, this is the majesty of driving, the nakedness of a sword." When I heard the king's condition, Afwa remained here, even from the dash. The ministers exchanged sly glances, with malicious smiles. This was an elaborate trap of death. We started to accuse son. Any count will not this. Conveying honesty on the gallows. And telling lies by the sword. That is, there is no way out. Rather, it is just an excuse for neglect. Fine drops of sweat appeared on Al-Zahran's forehead. At least it seemed to work at lightning speed. He knew that this was no ordinary argument. Transfer. Today's cutting is hot. And he is honest, so says the king. Honest. Hang him. And transfer. I am loyal to the king. He is a liar, so says the king. He lied. Get purer. Satan Jabir laughed. And he said, "Why are you blooming? Why did the Asenac contract happen? I'm bored with you for a minute." Only one. and I remain silent. He will consider you the executioner. I am silent. And he cuts you off without needing an answer. Time was passing quickly. The executioner waved their sword back in the air. He straightened the noose. Death was dancing over Zahran's head. He looked at the pilgrim, where some people were praying for her. Others had their eyes closed. Then he looked at the king, who started confident of his victory. And he was surprised. The gloom disappeared from Zahran's face. It appeared in his eyes. A sword sharper than any sword. He discovered a flaw in the king's condition. Because of this, the king's arrogance did not allow him to tell his stories. The king asked him the other time to talk. Will you tell the truth or a lie? Choose the gallows. I'm all safe. Zahran took a deep breath. He tightened his chest. He said, smiling, "Oh my God. Did you stand up for your promise?" The king said angrily. The word of the king is engraved on the stone. And the buyer of Taha is what will be. Zahran said. So, here in sentence. Fazali was among those present. I stopped. The stain flies. And the whales lived. All the yoni were suspended on Zahran's lips. And all the ears, waiting for a word. The executioner's sword was in the distance, with Davis from Anka. It dawns on you that it is a message of death. The Khazran looked at the shining sword. Then on the gallows. Finally, he looked into the eyes of Sultan Jabir. With a dark smile on his face. He raised his hand. Sultan's heart turned to a world that Sadaha echoed throughout the field. His historical sentence. Zahran said. What kind of sentence is it? Stop a moment. Then he shouted loudly. It's a shame for me with the sword of this executioner. My hugs will be long. There was confusion in the council, as soon as these words came out of Zahran's mouth. Until there was complete silence. No one understood. For the king, nor the ministers, nor the executioner, nor the year. We mean this sentence. She disappeared for a smile. The arrogance of the king's face is crude. And a wrinkle appeared on my forehead. He kept looking at Zahran for comments. With different looks, as if he was weighing the sentence in his mind. Then suddenly you changed. Roland directed the private minister, who was considered the smartest man after the king. He jumped from his place. He looked anxiously at the king and whispered. Oh my God. Something serious has happened. This prisoner turned the game around. The king looked at the minister angrily and said. What nonsense. He said he would be killed with a sword. Either this is true. Or lie. You executioner refused the ruling, but the executioner was a slave to orders. He stood like a statue. And when he raised his sword, the minister jumped between them. He said in the king's ear. That made the ground sway under his feet. Sultan Jabir, oh my God. No, you can't. It works. The first case, if you kill him with a sword. And I cut my throat. The sentence. Say Amukdali with a sword. You will be honest. Your badge was that if the sentence was true, they should be hanged. If not, you can kill him with a sword. Because honesty deserves the gallows. The second case. If you hang him, his statement would become a lie. Your badge was that if the sentence was a lie, he must be killed with a sword. If not, you can hang him too. Because lying is punishable by a sword. Badge of Sultan Jabir. As if a strong slap had been hit. He got up suddenly. His face was red with anger and embarrassment. He fell into a trap of his own making. There was no longer a way out. Use the sword. Contrary to the law. Because honesty requires hanging. And use the gallows. He also broke the law. Because lying requires the sword. The magazine started to get excited. People seemed to gradually understand the matter. Fear shifted in their eyes. He was surprised and answered. Isolated prisoners with weapons. One of the greatest hatters of his time. Only a little. The executioner was watching. Martin to Saifa, and flexible to the rope. From Theron the king's order. But the king himself. Become a stone. Zahran was standing in his place. And he had that same smile on his face. and his heart is pounding. Oh my God. I hate you now, the sword. Mother of the gallows. I am saddened by defeat. The silence in the majlis turned into noise. The public, soldiers and attendees were present. They are waiting for the king's decision. Sultan Jaber, who had never been defeated in their lives before, it was in the same condition as the New York City. I gripped his hand tightly. And the veins of his forehead were prominent. They could only point it out. In the executioner's wrath, Zahran's body is fizzling. But the matter. It was not a matter of strength. No matter of principle. Sultan Jaber was a sensation throughout the world. The king's word never changes. Even if he violated the police today, he will not only lose his respect among people. Bolsha was mentioned in history. Like a king, they lied. Contrary to the promise. The king looked at his private minister angrily. He said as he gritted my teeth, "Find a way out. Isn't there someone in the kingdom who can overturn this prisoner's logic?" The minister bowed his head and said in a shuddering voice, "Yamaleh has woven a fine, elaborate yarn." They were both denied. If we kill him, we will be lying. If we release it, we will lose. Then the minister paused for a while. He looked around and said in a low voice, "Imaleh, wisdom pardon him. And forget about your mercy. Thus, the condition remains valid. And do not let your generosity be diminished. People will understand that you are not defeated. Balmani Halif." Sultan Jaber thought for a moment. He had no other choice. They took a deep dive. As if they were swallowing ghee. Then we noticed his place. There was silence again. The Sultan said in a solemn voice, "Young man, you tried to confuse us with your words. And we created it, we can now cut it. Save you. We do not dispute with anyone regarding our questions. But we decided to appreciate your intelligence." Then he looked at the executioner. He gestured with his hand. "Untie him. We were unable to keep him in our condition. By giving, life is a gift from us. Go. Commit suicide." The king did not pronounce the word yar. Until Mugd Farhan walked around the square. Although we handed them a run. On chanting for fear of the king. However, their eyes were shining with victory. The executioner advanced according to the handcuffs placed on Zahran's hands and his feet, and when the iron chains fell heavy on the ground, he pedaled around the council. That was the ring of freedom. Zahran and Masamia smear, where the restrictions left their marks. And he was not ashamed of the king and the servants. He responded with a dignified smile, and he shook his head. Then he turned around and left the field. Shekel found a way for him. People were looking at him with amazement and reverence, except that young man who defeated death. It was a cage under the shadow of the sword. Go to Zahran. But Sultan Jaber, he remained alone on a throne. He was physically present, but he is defeated inside. For the first time he realized that the sword, whether it is iron or gold, it is not possible for them to extract water and ulcers. And since that day, fear has disappeared from people's hearts. They realized that the king was unjust. It can be mind-blowing. Najid Zahran was no ordinary hadith. The moment he left from the district of Harn, the foundations of Sultan Jaber's kingdom were shaken. The wall built by the king. Over the years, with fear and oppression, it's my God, one hit. People were seeing the former king. Your only strength is to be defeated. Or now. They realized that he was just a human being. It can be overcome with reason. In alleys and lanes. In cafes and homes. There is no longer talk of the Sultan's injustice. With the Harun Award. That prestige that used to terrify people's souls. Adzolit. They say that when the fear of the subjects disappears from their hearts, the king's throne does not remain standing for long. Sultan Al-Jaber could not to rule long after this hadith. They have emptied a psychological defeat from an internal one. He looked at his sword and thought, this iron can cut the entire neck. But he is unable to deliver a single sentence. After a short while, the revolutionaries are in that kingdom. But she did not put swords to shame. This is the rule of the Sultan. He was immortalized by Al-Tarihu Qataria, defeated. As for Zahran, he did not celebrate freely. Usually to my simple life. He began teaching children in one of the city's neighborhoods. And when people were coughing on him, how did you show all this bravery? And you are on the verge of death. He was smiling and answering. The sword only kills the body. As for the truth and pain, they can never be killed. When you have nothing to lose, is it less likely that it is a matter of fact or reality? The greatness of kings makes him helpless before you. Ran was incapacitated until he grew old and then died. But his word and his word died. The rest of my life. Tamam became the new role model in Kosaya. Doesn't he leave this story alone? We learn 3 great lessons. But we can look at it in more depth to understand its true meaning in life. First, knowledge is superior to powers. Physical strength is no matter how great it is. It is limited by the limits of humanity. His ability and age. I hope they know the mind in them. You make the real difference between the front and the individuals. So they were defeated by Imam in a football match. As if a great army was in front of the court's plans. And the mind and the one who directed power. Its value is similar. If he loses his mind, force became destructive randomness. Do not build or repair. But this was said, where swords fail, wisdom creates the way. Because wisdom thrives on what you see. Doors are opened that muscles and weapons cannot open. Technically, there should be no fear in adversity. Life is not without difficult situations. A person may face fear, or selection, or even a feeling of defeat. But the real difference between successful people and others, it is a method. Dealing with these moments. Fear puts you in thought. And insight prevails. While calm down. It gives people the ability to make health decisions. In adversity, escape is not a solution. Rather, it is steadfastness and calm thinking. It is the way to escape. How many people survived a difficult situation? Only because he did not allow fear to befall him. Rather, he addressed the matter as a punishment for Nihad and a protective look. Then, the great is destined to remain silent. Zooming in is one of the most dangerous sins of the soul. Because it makes a person see himself above others. So he ignores my true forgiveness. Satan Jabir in the story. He thought of her and his forces. Ensure Hidayama's protection. But he forgot that vanity is the first step toward ruin. The history of 1,000,000 people and great forces. She fell not because of her weak hostility. Because of her excessive self-confidence. Fate always reminds people that strength is not permanent. And that anyone is important to him. He can get angry if he gets arrogant. That's why I folded a bunch of prayers. Rather, it is an awareness of the reality of man and his limits. At the end of these 3 lessons, it's not just a story. Rather, they are rules for life. Less driving. And their hearts are in distress. In the same fold, important heights were placed. Dear friends, from which country are you watching this video? What do you think of this story? Share your opinions in the comments and subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much for watching. And see you in another story.